So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Fostering Pastoral Creativity in the Community, the 8th session in the Called and Co-Responsible Summer Seminars for Church Life Renewal. My name is Megan Shepard, and I'm the Program Director for Notre Dame Vision here in the McGrath Institute for Church Life. And I'm joined today by my colleague Scott Boyle and a panel of undergraduate students who we call Mentors in Faith, who will speak a little bit later about their experiences of pastoral creativity this summer. And so today I want to share with all of you how responding to the unexpected cancellation of programs due to the COVID-19 pandemic actually led to a fruitful experience of pastoral creativity. And we believe that now, as we have a chance to step back from it, that it can be a model for fostering co-responsibility and mission among the laity. But to start off, for those who might not be familiar with the Notre Dame Vision program, I want to highlight how the co-responsibility has been exercised by Notre Dame, St. Mary's, and Holy Cross undergraduates for 18 years as they prepare and serve as leaders for these Notre Dame Vision summer conferences for high school students. Every year, these college students apply, interview, and are hired back in the fall. And then throughout the spring semester, they're immersed in formation, taking Professor Lenny DiLorenzo's theology course, The Catholic Imagination, participating in several pastoral skills workshops, music rehearsals, and then they meet regularly in reflection groups, all to prepare to accompany these high school students in 4 one-week summer conferences each summer. And at the heart of the formation we provide is the Catholic Imagination, which explores this dynamic relationship between the gift and task of communion. And this is the focus of Professor DiLorenzo's theology course, where the gift of communion is the offer of God's life by the Spirit that draws us into union with the Father and the Son. And the task of communion is to become what we receive, to become a bond of communion for others, to embody charity and live that out and draw others into communion. And so our mentors had spent this spring semester preparing to walk with high school students as they explored this gift and task of communion in their own lives. Because at the heart of Notre Dame Vision is a mission to empower young people to recognize grace at work in their lives and to respond to God's call by offering their gifts in service to the needs of the world. And then in March, the pandemic. And the McGrath Institute made the decision to cancel all on-campus summer programming. And while canceling our conference was disappointing in many ways, and the pandemic has wreaked havoc in so many different ways in our world, one thing that was hard was really considering these college students who had been preparing since the fall and had also committed back in the fall to spend this summer serving with us. And so in the midst of so much uncertainty, we really hope to try and find a way to still offer them an opportunity to exercise their leadership and service to the church. And we thought, what if, instead of focusing on the high school students who would normally come to campus, perhaps the mentors could focus on their local communities as a continuation, an extension of this mission and vision, maybe like field agents out in the world. And with the gracious support of the McGrath leadership and the Provost's office, we were able to reimagine their summer ministry opportunity, which is also a one-credit theology course, by considering alternative ways for them to unleash their creativity, to assess a pastoral situation in their community, and develop a plan for response. And thus, pastoral creativity in the community was born. And as we developed the parameters for this new opportunity in the span of a few weeks, we considered not only how to structure the project, what they would do, the steps they would take, but also the fundamental dispositions that we always seek to cultivate in our formation: curiosity and wonder, compassion and empathy, humility and generosity. And so we developed a process that nurtures both their pastoral creativity, the task of communion, if you will, alongside their personal spiritual growth, the gift of communion. And Pope Francis himself encourages young people to take up this mantle of co-responsibility. In the post-synodal exhortation Christus Vivit, Pope Francis speaks both to the wider church as well as directly to young people as he encourages them to take up this mission. Above all, he tells them, in one way or another, fight for the common good. Serve the poor. Be protagonist of the revolution of charity and service, capable of resisting the pathologies of consumerism and superficial individualism. And thus, inspired by Pope Francis and our own experience of ministering with young people, as we crafted the outline for the process of pastoral creativity in the community, we focused not so much on the project or a product that they would produce, but really ways to be attentive to a process unfolding within them, of both the work of the Holy Spirit in their hearts, drawing them ever more closer into the divine embrace, and their work of patient, attentive listening with humility, openness, and compassion to a community of concern in their lives. And so to help support their ministerial efforts and provide some structure and guidance, we created the Pastoral Creativity Worksheet to walk them through the various movements and also to provide questions to consider at each stage during what was equivalent about 6 weeks of their initial commitment to vision for the summer. So we're going to take a moment just to speak a little bit about each of these movements. This first movement was their preparatory reflection. And then this is where we set our expectations and parameters for the process, but also really named the dispositions that are important to us in this journey. We invited them to explore their gifts using our gift discernment resource in McGrath and reflect on the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, very concrete ways of exercising our co-responsibility. But most importantly was to ground all of this in prayer as a meditation on the gift of communion, as well as the task of building up communion. So the first step for them then was to identify a community. And as we think about enacting this in our own lives, to start with thinking, who's important to you? Who do you care about? Look around the people in your life. Which ones capture your imagination? What are needs they have, and how can you see yourself responding in some way? So to thoughtfully identify a community. The next movement is to listen to that community, to be attentive to how we listen. Not just think about methods to engage, whether it's Zoom calls, surveys, phone calls, socially distanced one-on-one meetings, but also the disposition we want to approach them with, of curiosity. Not a judgment or a preconceived notion of, oh, I know what young people need today, but really opening ourselves up to asking, what do you need? What are you concerned about? I want to know more. How are you doing? And from there, we move into pondering. And we particularly choose that word, pondering, because it's taking a look at the information we received, the needs, the resources, the questions, the challenges, but to do so not merely to analyze, but with a disposition of curiosity, of wondering. And we encourage the mentors to tap into the formation they've received, formally through our program, but also for all of us in our lives of discipleship, and ponder. And in that pondering, we open ourselves up to, how is the Holy Spirit moving us in this? What is the Holy Spirit calling our attention to focus on? And then, after all of this is when we start to respond to the practical, tangible needs that we may see. But also, we really encourage the mentors to unleash their creativity. It's one of my favorite phrases in all this. There is an assessment of needs and response, but there's also grounding ourselves in the richness of the beauty of the Catholic faith, of giving ourselves the time to notice how that can speak to this community in this situation with these needs, to inform our response and to transform the world, and to draw on scripture, prayer, sacraments, the communion of saints, our communion with one another. And from these resources, drawing on these, develop our response. And then finally, moving into reflecting on the process as a whole. Because this entire journey wasn't just about finding something for them to do this summer, but it's about exercising our vocation to holiness, to continue to discern more deeply where that's calling us forth to share our gifts with the world, to pour ourselves out in self-giving love. And so this final movement is just as important as the others, taking the time to ask, what did we learn about ourselves, about how we approach others, about how we listen? What did we learn new about the Catholic faith? How was our imagination transformed? How have we seen grace at work? And how might we go about this in other areas in our life? And so in this entire process, given the uncertainty of the situations they may find in their local communities, we focused on building a process that would provide structure and guidance for their self-guided work, but also the space for flexibility in figuring out who to serve and how best to do it, given the limitations of the pandemic. And also just space to unleash their creativity, while also providing accountability and support. And again, here we took our cue from Pope Francis, who says, certainly they need to be helped and guided, but at the same time left free to develop new approaches with creativity and a certain audacity. And so we were more concerned with helping them use their insight, ingenuity, and knowledge to address these issues and concerns. And accompanying our mentors on this journey has been a real gift. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Scott Boyle, who's the Associate Director for Recruitment and Formation in both the Vision and ECHO programs, to share more about this dimension of our process. Scott?
Thank you so much, Megan, and hi to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to say also for myself that it is a real privilege to be with all of you today. You know, in approaching our formation and accompaniment, there was a time to grieve. But in another sense, we also knew that this would be a real moment of opportunity. Notre Dame and its environment has always been at the heart of what we do, at the heart of this experience. But we've also been fundamentally interested in a type of accompaniment that is going to push our participants and our mentors, anybody who's coming through this conference, to move beyond strictly what we offer at Notre Dame. Well, and toward what, you might ask? Well, quite simply helping others live, helping them live into the fundamental gift, the transformative gift and responsibility of their baptismal call. That is to live out real commitments in the church and the world, especially amid changing circumstances and challenges. Well, we really had that opportunity this summer. So we really had to put our money where our mouth was. But to do that, we had to return to our fundamentals and to apply them in new contexts. So today, I just want to talk about two of those fundamentals. So we'll keep it hopefully pretty simple. So if you're keeping score at home, we're going to cover two fundamental things that we talked about this summer. The first is curating wonder and curiosity for pastoral creativity through the beauty and the witness of the church. And Megan set us up so well for this, and to really highlight that this has always been essential for us. You know, in a time when we're bombarded with information and misinformation, it can be so easy to caricature the church or for its relevance to get swept away in favor of what's new or perhaps fashionable. So part of our task, part of our formation and accompaniment has always been to invite our participants and our mentors into the richness of the real church and its practices, to help them see it as it really is through the richness of the scriptures and its lived tradition. You know, if we can get folks curious about what is happening, if we can get them to wonder about the beauty and the richness of what's contained in the church, then we have a better shot at tilling that soil for a committed life of discipleship to blossom both in truth and in love. But we didn't have our familiar grotto or the basilica this summer. So admittedly, we had to use less appealing mediums like this one, although we're using it to our great benefit today, Zoom meetings. But also we engaged a class web platform called Sakai to engage our mentors. And each week we invested a good deal of work and time curating online content to put our mentors into contact with that beauty of the church. We built on the theological foundation of the class that Megan was talking about, building on the emphasis on scripture and letting God's word speak. And Megan and I actually took turns each week using Professor DiLorenzo's book, A God Who Questions, recording a video reflection on a passage of scripture highlighted in the book, and then following that up by sharing resources, responding to those questions and concerns that we received throughout the weeks that complemented that scriptural engagement. Further, we were also really intentional about cultivating and compiling prayer resources that our mentors could explore. And further, one of the clearest paths to discipleship is the works of mercy. So we used one of the worksheets that we've used in our conferences to invite mentors to really think about and pray with the works of mercy and how to put those into action. And we also used the charisms of the communion of saints, another hallmark of vision, and had our mentors engage in an activity to delve deeper into those charisms and reflect on how they might be able to use that in their own lives and in their own communities. And each week, each of those 6 weeks, we kept that pattern going, sharing other resources and prayers and articles. But as we all know, it is really hard, and like anything worth doing, it's hard to grow in faith unless we spend time working at it, especially when we are not feeling inspired or other things are getting in the way, like a pandemic. We've long sought to harness the natural curiosity and energy of the young people that come by helping them to set concrete practices and habits to lean on when things like that arise. And our conferences were always the helpful spaces for that. So in this context, we wanted to help them reimagine what would at least be a baseline for some of those practices that would help them to stay committed and open to reflection. We asked our mentors first and foremost to engage or perhaps even establish prayer practices so that they were spending time with God each week. We also asked them to set aside time for individual and small group reflection and gathered them to check in both in small groups and with us as a program staff. We provided all of this and set these practices with the hope and, well, the pretty good hunch based on our years of work with this that these foundations would catalyze our mentors to help them see the beauty and the truth and the sacredness of the world as God sees it, and then invite them to respond in kind. So that is principle number 1. Principle and foundation number 2 is this. We wanted to help our mentors strengthen that commitment to pastoral creativity by helping them to cultivate relationships and providing intentional pastoral support. What do I mean by that? Well, if you think about it, in a normal summer, the proximity of our mentors, our staff, and our participants on campus at Notre Dame make it, quite frankly, really easy to create community. We're in close proximity in the dorms, and we're using a variety of conference spaces and really the whole campus. It's easy then for us to build that kind of relational rapport where we can celebrate joy together and provide that extra sense of like oomph and encouragement when inevitably obstacles come and energy wanes. It becomes easier then to bring that pastoral creativity to life because we're able to lean on and nourish those relationships, creating spaces to check in, to pray, to be rejuvenated. Well, we knew that if we were going to inspire and cultivate this pastoral creativity and not just, put them into contact, with that truth and beauty in sort of just an intellectual or an academic sense, but to really help them make those commitments and live it out, we would need to provide that support through fostering relationships and bringing our mentors and our staff together in the virtual sphere. So one of the first things that we did was that we, as a staff, scheduled 30-minute time slots each of those first 2 weeks of the project to talk with each of the 48 mentors over Zoom. Myself, Megan, and our colleague Michelle were each responsible for a group of mentors. And during these conversations, we asked them questions, pretty open-ended. How are you doing? What has your prayer and reflection looked like so far? Do you have any questions or insights about the project or this process? And then, how can we just support you? How can we pray for you? Sure, in one sense, these questions gave us that formal opportunity to check in. But what we found was that these conversations were really a catalyst for more personal dialogue and relational support. And in addition to these conversations, we were reading and responding to weekly written reflections from our mentors. And they wrote each week about 300 to 500 words. So we had that additional information and reflection to draw upon. As we mentioned, they were also meeting in small groups and taking turns to lead those small groups, talking about not just the projects, but also their lives. We also hosted a virtual trivia night and a prayer experience so that they could unwind. Here's where I think the rubber really met the road. Compared to the other summers, the pace of this summer was a bit slower, but it gave us the opportunity to go deeper. Asking, and I can think of this for myself, how you're doing to a mentor in a normal summer might be met with a quick, I'm good, tired, and then it was kind of off to the next thing in the midst of a frenetic program schedule and a lot of activities. But by contrast, in this space, I think the times that we spent together were fuller. By setting these spaces and expectations for writing, for reading, for talking, and really having the time to do that, we were able to, I think, not only create, but enter into spaces of real dialogue, responding to real needs and concerns and ideas, and to imagine together, all of us, possibilities for response. And I think our mentors too, and you're going to hear from them in just a moment, you'll hear how I think they were much more willing to go into that space, to share with us the challenges and the complexities of that process, and to respond because, well, they really felt like they had the time and attention and the room to be able to unpack these movements and to make adjustments as necessary. And as we had all these conversations, we named these challenges. We were also very clear to, as Megan mentioned, remind them that this, again, was not just about some sort of end product, but to encourage them and remind them to be faithful to the process of listening and of responding, and to take heart and comfort in the very real commitments that they were making. And the sense of relief, I can see it, I feel the exhales, the sense of sort of relief and comfort when they heard that was palpable. They felt heard and they came back to ask other things. In subsequent weeks, I got questions about not only the project, but how to pray, how to think through making big decisions. And so really all of this was a reminder that strong relationships and community are such important foundations for the work of discipleship, for the work of living out that commitment to our baptismal call. And I think, and I could certainly, I think, speak for Megan as well, we're looking forward to continuing to see how these resonances can continue. Now, with all of that, now that Megan and I have kind of outlined kind of the scope and the whole of the project, we want to invite now 3 of the mentors who were, first of all, so gracious to say yes to this process this summer, but have also graciously agreed to share a little bit of their reflections and their experiences with the approximately 157 of us in the room here right now. So I'm delighted to welcome them, and we'll first start off with Maura. Hi, Maura. How are you?
Hello.
Welcome.
I'm doing well, Scott.
So glad to have you with us here today. Before we get into things, would you mind just introducing yourself for everybody?
Oh, not at all. So like Scott said, my name is Maura Lee, and I am going to be a rising senior next year at Notre Dame, which is wild to me, and I don't like to talk about it because I love college, and I don't want it to be over. But I am from Northville, halfway in between Detroit and Ann Arbor. in Michigan. And I am majoring in science business with 2 minors, one in theology and the other in compassionate care and medicine.
Yeah, thanks so much, Maura. Can you tell us a little bit of like what it was like for you to live into this experience? Give us a little bit of like the boots on the ground, like how you lived into this opportunity and your approach.
Oh, absolutely. So this summer, as Scott and Megan have so wonderfully laid out for all of us, we as a Vision staff were really invited to take our training and desire to serve high school students and broaden our scope to a community that was perhaps beyond the Notre Dame landscape. The communities that I ended up choosing to serve after lots of thinking and reflection, again, as Scott and Megan have mentioned, are the 2 L'Arche homes in Arlington, Virginia. To pull from their website for a bit of reference, at L'Arche, adults with and without intellectual disabilities share life and friendships in community. So L'Arche homes are scattered all across the world, allowing for adults with mental disabilities, or to use their language, core family members, to be supported by those living in the homes with them, or assisted family members, as they live life to the fullest together. So I first came into contact with L'Arche when I was sort of half-heartedly scanning the Center for Social Concerns website for seminar ideas. And I decided to go to L'Arche for spring break, my sophomore year of college, and every expectation of mine was exceeded, but not necessarily by their extravagance or any radical new way of life that I witnessed. I was just blown away by the immediate sense of welcome and total transparency. Everyone was so open, and because of that, friendships were made so quickly. I immediately connected with their mission of upholding the dignity of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and the very practical way with which they lived out this vocation with total love and support. So to briefly summarize what, again, has truly been an engaging and thought-provoking experience, my own initial goal for the project was to create something that helped L'Arche not to feel so isolated during the pandemic. Their doors are now closed for the first time since they practically opened. Usually, under normal circumstances, they are always welcoming in friends, neighbors, and random groups of Notre Dame students from time to time for dinner or other celebrations. And now, for obvious reasons, they are unable to do so. So I thought, based on my limited experience of what ended up being 2 spring break trips, I thought that I would hear a serious and deafening ache for more visitors or other tangible forms of companionship. However, when I spoke to my friend Charles, who is a core member at one of the L'Arche homes in Arlington, Virginia, we talked about what makes his community unique, how they've been spending their time over the past couple of months, the house's wants. And we also talked about, my summer, what Vision looked like as it's reimagined, and how we're trying to be creative in our co-response to each other's communities. And so I asked him, what is your community's biggest need right now? And he responded with kitchen utensils, which was not what I expected, to say the least. So I ran, with that answer, and I ended up and am still in the process of reaching out to students on Notre Dame's campus who have ever been involved with L'Arche, whether it's during a summer service learning program or a couple of the seminar trips. And I'm enlisting their help to find fun kitchen utensils worthy of a home such as L'Arche. So something like this. And we will fill this care package when it is sent out in the fall to Virginia with letters and love, and most importantly, kitchen utensils. So that's a grossly condensed version of my summer Vision experience, but I think it is one that hits on a lot of the most important movements.
Wow, thanks so much, Maura, for sharing that. I think my heart grew three sizes imagining all of these like kitchen utensils, coming to these L'Arche communities. And thanks for sharing that experience. It sounds like this whole process, things ended up a little bit differently than perhaps, what you had expected in the beginning when you were first sort of entering into this process and this opportunity. I guess, for everybody who's gathering here, as you think about, kind of drawing this, at least this more formal kind of opportunity to a close, and perhaps for folks who are thinking about, maybe possibly entering into some of these movements themselves, what would you say is perhaps maybe one thing that you've learned just in your experience that was really important for you as you engage this process?
Yes, of course. So obviously there are, or were, as you mentioned, our summer is coming to a close. So many amazing parts of this wonderful, albeit different, vision experience. But if I had to pick sort of an overarching theme to the past 6 or 8 weeks, it would be listening, or at least trying to learn how to listen to God in whatever way that He is manifesting Himself in our lives, the way that they look right now. My life and all of our lives, to a certain extent, look very different from what I'm sure we all initially anticipated. I was fully expecting to be immersed into service with high school students on campus, but instead I am home, devoting more time to my family and this project, among many other things. So then the question becomes, where is God here? Where is God in this messy and unpredictable life that we're all leading? And how does my faith and vision propel me to live into this summer differently? So Vision Reimagined did such a great job giving all of the mentors sort of a structure that allowed us to carve out space to listen not only to the movements of the Holy Spirit, but also just the wisdom of those that God had placed in our lives. For example, it was only when speaking with my small group about my conversation with Charles and his sort of surprising answer to my question when I really realized the subtle profoundness of Charles's answer really directing or redirecting my approach to ministry. Teresa Rice, who is a 2020 Notre Dame graduate and a member of my small group, when I was talking to all of them about it, she responded to Charles's somewhat tongue-in-cheek answer of kitchen utensils with a laugh. And, she said, "Isn't that what ministry is?" And she's totally right. Ministry should be, and that's what this summer really was, listening to community, pondering what we find, and responding in the way that this makes us feel called. The deep and intentional conversations that I was able to have both with my small groups and Scott, who's my mentor, during a time when I was feeling isolated was a huge gift. And it's definitely in part due to Teresa's answers, obviously other members of my small group as well, and the resources that Vision gave to us. I was able to listen to that. So, and I decided to take both seriously and quite literally Charles's response to my question. So if I may conclude in proposing this image, when I sat down to reflect and prepare about what I was going to speak about to you all today, I had my dog Sugar with me. And Sugar is always very excited about life. And she just came over to me and she stretched, and then she just plopped her entire 65-pound body just like right at my feet. And so she's wagging her tail and she's whining at me until she knows that she has my full attention. And she's smiling at me in this like very golden retriever sort of way. And I just thought, what a great representation of this summer. Ministry that chooses to be sort of this really excited dog sitting at the feet of our variously chosen communities, ears listening, tails wagging, and paws, or feet rather, ready for action. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity and truly, truly appreciative to be a part of something that enabled me to reach out to others while also giving me the space for rich and internal reflection. So anyway, long story short, I think my one takeaway from this summer was the gift of being able to listen and to sort of learn how to listen in a new and quite frankly unexpected way.
Thanks so much, Maura. I'm sure there are probably other Golden Retriever fans in here, so maybe we can all take that image for ministry of this, kind of openness and eagerness, towards what's in our paths. So in my sort of 9 years of doing this, I've never heard of that image before. So I'm grateful for that. I'm going to take it with me. So thank you so much, Maura. Let's go to Ua now, in the greatest city in the world, at least according to Hamilton, New York City. Ua, are you there?
I'm here, Scott. Hear you loud and clear, man.
Great. Well, it's good to see you. Could you just begin by introducing yourself for everybody?
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ua Tom. If you don't know how to pronounce Ua, think about the noise that you make when you get hit in the gut. So it's just like, Ua. And that's basically, that's my name. I'm from the Bronx, New York City, home of the New York Yankees, East Coast, Beast Coast. I'm a rising sophomore, so the class of 2023, and a political science major.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Ua, for that introduction. Can you, maybe a similar question to begin with you, can you tell us a little bit about kind of, this whole process and what it was like to live into that for you?
Right, Scott. I mean, so the past couple of months in New York City with the COVID pandemic have been chaotic, to say the least. It's been really tough for everybody, and had a huge impact on myself personally. I had a lot of friends and family actually contracted the virus and died because of it, including my grandfather, who I was very close to, who passed away in April. So it really did take a heavy toll on myself and my family, and all 8 million of us here in New York City, and honestly, like, I feel like the whole metro area, to be honest. So once I was able to properly mourn and deal with my own mental health issues, and that comes with prayer, with reflection, with opening yourself up to people that love you, such as the people at McGrath and with ND Vision, I knew that I really wanted to work with the COVID response. And hopefully, I initially helped to work in healthcare or in hospitals or something like that. Unfortunately for me, nobody really wants a kid who's willing to volunteer, who has no healthcare professional experience, because of obvious liabilities that might cause. And so that was really my first little taste of disappointment, that little roadblock, if you will, that feeling of uselessness and discouragement, that I feel like a lot of the mentors here at ND Vision and with this pastoral creativity course kind of felt in the first weeks and months of the pandemic. So I obviously went back to the drawing board, and that comes, like I said, with, and like you also said, Scott, with these concrete practices and habits such as prayer, meditation, reflection, and was blessed to talk through it with yourself, Scott, with my prayer partners, in my small groups, with the pastoral creativity course. Shout out to Ellis, who's my prayer partner. He's been a real rock for me during this time. And kind of open myself up to opportunities and ways in which I could be used. Because it's not, clearly God wanted to show me that it isn't about what I want to do or what I feel I might be needed for, but what He wants me to do, what my community needs me to do. And that's what the pastoral creativity course is all about. So as I continue to ask God about what He wanted for me, I once again started to look at my community and started feeling called to help with racial divides in addition to COVID response. And that really started when my sister was harassed on the subway by somebody who claimed that she was the reason for the COVID pandemic. Obviously, having an Asian face in the hotbed of the COVID pandemic, it brings out the best in many people, but also the worst in others. And you can read in between the lines with that. So that was kind of further fueled this desire to help with racial divides when I witnessed the recent riots and protests that were happening throughout my city, and I really got to see how people in my communities, the people that I went to school with, the people that I went to church with, had been divided because of the color of their skin, and that was so. That wasn't new, unfortunately, but it was exacerbated during this time. So that was in relation to particularly the Black Lives Matter movement. So I knew that I wanted to kind of help heal the racial divides in New York City in particular. So after some research for potential opportunities with community organizations, I was referred to a nonprofit actually called the Chinese American Planning Council. And I'd never worked with an Asian American group in my life, but was really fortunate to get this opportunity to check it out, to put my name in, to throw in my elevator pitch. I perfected it over weeks of discouragement to say, okay, what's going to attract somebody? It's to say, do you need free work, you know, and who's going to say no to that at that point? So really it went on to learning more about the CPC, and I was really thrilled to learn of its mission to provide social and economic empowerment to not just Chinese Americans, but to really all people of color, all immigrants and all low-income families. And those demographics, if you really look at the data, are the people who are most affected by the pandemic in reality. So with my work with the CPC, I've been able to actually be a volunteer, a teacher's assistant at a daycare for children who are elementary through middle school age of essential workers. So it's really fulfilling to be able to know that I'm helping the people who are really helping me and our city and our community stay afloat during these really turbulent and chaotic times. So, I mean, to kind of close, as rewarding as my volunteer work is, I still had to face like that dilemma of how I would share my faith while working at the CPC, which is a secular organization. And this was probably the most fun part of the project, and that was really to come up with a creative way to share my faith. And I realized by simply sticking to, I keep saying, these concrete practices and habits, such as saying grace before meals, or reading my Bible while kids are having their individual reading time, or wearing a shirt, a t-shirt with a cross on it just for fun, or a dove or something. It really sows those seeds of curiosity where I could share my faith to children and even my coworkers and colleagues who ask what I'm doing, what I'm wearing, what my shirt says, what I'm reading. And so it's really encouraging to know that by simply serving as a positive influence or a light, a salt, right? People automatically ask what's different about you, and it really opens you up to sharing your faith. So that's just a little bit about my project and the process that I took to get to where I'm at right now.
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much, Ua, for sharing all of that, and especially your courage in the midst of these very real obstacles, you know, that you were facing. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us, you know, our condolences, you know, for you and your family. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking, you know, as you think about, you know, kind of moving beyond this project, like, do you have a concrete I don't know, takeaway that you could share with all of us that you're just like, yeah, this is one of the things that I want to really latch onto and continue to embrace as I continue to move forward from here?
It would definitely be to embrace your humility in a way. So staying humble, staying grateful for everything that you've been blessed with. It really, when you sit down and you reflect on the great things in life and how much God has blessed you, it just encourages you and fills you to go out and serve, to want to give what God has given to you to other people. Now, clearly only God can give that to people, but to be that tool used by God is really such a blessing that and everybody always says that giving like feels better than receiving, and when you're grateful and when you're humble, it really is important to making sure that you get what you need to get done. So.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks again, Ua, and thanks so much for sharing your story with us. And finally, we'll go over to Haley, who has the pleasure of actually, this is not, Haley, your first summer with Notre Dame Vision. This is actually your second summer with Vision, albeit a very different summer. So we're glad to have you here. Could you just, first of all, maybe begin by introducing yourself for everybody?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. My name is Haley Wooton. I'm a rising senior at Notre Dame, which is very hard for me to believe. I'm studying economics and applied math, and I'm from Wooton, Illinois, which is a little suburb about 25 miles west of Chicago.
So yeah, and you know, kind of this is your, you know, I'm thinking, you know, kind of your second time around. So you've been through, you know, some formation, you know, you've been through even maybe a regular movement of a Vision Summer. So can you tell us, I don't know, what was inspiring for you, or what was kind of your catalyst, and how did you enter into this project and this opportunity for this summer?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as you said, this is actually my second summer with Vision. And one of the biggest reasons I wanted to return was this call I felt to serve high school students. So when this project was first introduced to us back in the spring, I immediately thought of the high school youth group at my own parish here at home. This is a group that I was a part of as a high schooler. Since I still felt so called to serve high school age people this summer, I really felt drawn to that community to serve this summer, especially you know, knowing that they'd be facing a lot of unique challenges this summer in particular, on top of kind of what high schoolers already go through as young people and as young people of faith. So like I said, this was a community that I was already pretty familiar with, since it had been a big support for me when I was a high schooler. And since I've kept in touch with my high school youth minister, Teresa, who I believe is in here somewhere. Hi, Teresa. But also knowing that this group has changed a lot since I was a high schooler. So I really wanted to be mindful of the fact that their high school experience was already a lot different than mine was just a few years ago. So with that, it was really important for me to approach this group with openness and humility, to not make assumptions about their own experiences, especially at this time. So with that, a lot of my listening work was really informal and just focused on growing in friendship with these young people, spending time with them however we could through, you know, virtual meetings or socially distanced outdoor activities that we were able to pull off. So whether that was, you know, socially distant picnic in the park, or helping to record skits for the at-home vacation Bible school program our parish is putting on for the little ones. There was a lot of really awesome opportunities to just grow in relationship with these young people, and through that, receiving and hearing what their struggles were at this time. And I think for me, the most surprising thing was that even when we had, you know, activities or goals set for our time together, most of the time is really just spent talking. The kids really just wanted to be with each other and to express themselves to each other. And I was kind of surprised, since this time I've been really bored and wanting structure. So I figured, you know, the high schoolers might want that too, just want to get out of the house and do something, that I feel a lot of us are probably feeling right now. But really, they just wanted to be in each other's presence and to express themselves. And I think that really came from the fact that as a high schooler, you kind of expect this time to be a period of time when you're gaining independence, you know, when you get to express yourselves frequently to your peers and to other adults who are interested in what you have to say. But of course, they've been restricted to their homes. So a lot of the opportunity to express themselves or be around peers is lost. So I think something they were really, really aching for was just being in each other's presence and the opportunity to express themselves. And then some other things I noticed in spending time with them, especially among the students who just graduated in the spring, was that they're facing a lot of uncertainty about the future. You know, the transition to college or life after high school is, I think, always something that's a little bit scary. And so to kind of add the uncertainty of life in a pandemic is really, really hard for them. And just the fact that they've missed out on a lot of the traditions and celebrations that were supposed to be all about them, and a time for them to uniquely celebrate all they've accomplished and really, you know, take pride in what they've done. They've had to sacrifice that for the sake of others. So in crafting a response, I really wanted to address those things, their desire to be heard and to express themselves, a lot of the special moments that they've had to give up, and especially the feelings of uncertainty that, you know, cause a lot of anxiety, and I think make it really challenging to engage with your faith as you're so concerned about, you know, what comes next. And it's really difficult to kind of find where God or where grace might be in a situation like this. So in response, along with our youth minister, we've been developing a format for the graduates to share stories of grace with each other. Stories of grace being a process of reflection and storytelling to identify and articulate grace at work that the McGrath Institute has introduced to me as a vision mentor, and something that I found really helpful in my own experience to reflect and identify and express grace in my life. So I really felt that the graduates could benefit from this as a way to reflect on their high school experience, to allow them to express themselves and be heard among their peers. And then of course to cultivate the habit of identifying and articulating grace in their lives to, hopefully build up resilience in their faith. Whereas it might be difficult right now to find grace in all the uncertainty they're facing, but practicing locating it in their past experiences, I think can kind of help them face this uncertainty really bravely. And then of course to just celebrate all of the accomplishments that they've had as young people, as high schoolers. So for that, I've adapted from Professor DiLorenzo's book Witness, a little info guide to introduce them to the process and help walk them through crafting their own story of grace. So yeah, that's been my summer, and it's been a really great journey and a real gift to walk with them during this very unique time in all of our lives.
Yeah, thanks so much, Haley. I'm smiling because I'm listening to some of your language, kind of that you're using, and just kind of how it's clear how the theological imagination has kind of really, influenced you and how you've been able to bring that to this community. Maybe just briefly too, just thinking to, for all of us, yeah, but, you've lived into this. What's one thing you're, I don't know, taking away, or maybe one thing that you would want to share about a disposition heading into maybe thinking about entering into a process like this?
Yeah, of course. I think something that was a little bit surprising to me was how relational my work ended up being this summer. That was something I really loved about, traditional vision, and something that drew me back, and it's something I was worried might get lost in this kind of virtual format. But I was really blessed to be able to still really dive in and build relationships with these young people. And I think what helped make that happen was a disposition of openness, openness to ever-changing circumstances, and openness to a relationship with these young people, I think was really important, and what really kind of set me up for success in this. It's easy to just kind of look at this worksheet and think, oh, like, great, I get to follow these steps and it's that easy. But it's really about approaching with openness and letting these steps kind of draw you further in, and being open to going beyond. So that was really a great gift from, this process, and from the Vision staff as well, was encouraging me to be really open.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Haley. And I think just speaking for all of us, and, you mentioned, speaking of drawing us in, thank you to all three of you for drawing us into your experience and to your yeses. We're so grateful to you for your courage to do this and to enter in with us into this space. So I know on behalf of all of us, we just want to say, and especially for Megan and I, a big thank you for everything that you have done and will continue to do. So with that, I will toss it back over to Megan.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We may have a few more people join us. And thank you for the questions that you've been putting into the chat. And if you have more as we've been sitting here talking, that would be wonderful. Our first question we have is from Robert Keller. And so our staff will unmute you, Robert, and you can ask your question of the panel.
I think I'm unmuted. Okay. Well, first of all, a context for a thought. I guess with this COVID situation, the pace of our life is completely altered. And even in our chat room, we were observing that not only are we slowed down in many ways, and that can be also dangerous. But I mean, if it's on the healthier side, we also haven't been distracted. There's no sports. We can't go shopping. We're not going out to eat all the time. And we're even finding the limitations of media to some degree. But in all of this, it seems that we might be developing, if it's healthy, better listening skills. And I think Maura mentioned that. I think all of our people have mentioned that we're hearing things we haven't heard before. And I'm wondering, I don't think we're going to be able to freeze this. That's not the way it's going to be. But I wonder that as our society will change, because I think we're going to, in a sense, survive the COVID thing. But is there a way we can learn from this how to listen and how to keep a pace that's more humane or something? And it's going to be hard because you can't, you have to learn it on your own. You can't, this is not for grandkids. You can tell them a great story, but it's like, great. And then they go off and do their own thing. But how how do we do this? And maybe it's the way that ministers minister. I don't know.
I think that's a wonderful question. And I know for myself, the experience of walking with these young people and listening to them as they've gone through this experience of listening has been transformative, and figuring out ways that I can better my own listening. So I think we don't have a whole lot of time, but if one of the mentors has a thought on sort of how do you feel that you can respond like this and help this live on?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think something we realized, and especially in working with young people this summer, we've also, had to take it a lot slower with the youth group than you'd expect, like a youth group summer to go with, lots of elaborate games and fun conferences and travel, which is so fun and rewarding in its own way. But I think, typically you'd imagine kind of a lot of pressure to have this like really fun, active summer for them. But again, we found that if we, kind of take that all away, their desire is also just for community and just to be in each other's presence. And taking it slow, I think, has not disappointed them at all. Even if we thought like they'd be upset about losing all these special things, really they still like found just as much joy in being together. So I think that can be a lesson for us that like, even if we can't pull off these like grand elaborate things anymore, like just being in each other's presence like is the gift of it all. And like if we can make that happen, then that is enough, and we're not disappointing people by putting ourselves in their presence, if there's not more we can give. So I think that's something for me and working with high schoolers that I discovered with like the slowed down pace.
Thanks, Haley. And we have another question from John McNamara that if you want to, I'll unmute you, John, and ask it. And then if Ua or Maura would like to respond.
Great, thank you so much. Maura, how will your experience of this summer affect your relationships with your own family, the domestic church? And how about the families you will belong to in 15 or 20 years, or maybe when you're a grandparent? Can you speak to that for us?
Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks for your question, Dan. I think, as I spoke to earlier, I think the big theme of my summer has been really actively trying to learn how to listen. In a couple of earlier drafts of my talk, I mentioned that I am a planner by nature. I like to color code and make lists and move forward. And I think the whole theme of listening before acting was should not have been such a radical concept, but kind of was. And so I think as, living in college, you're not used to living at home with family, with siblings, sharing a car, all that good stuff. I never thought I was going to be at home for this amount of time period again since I left college. And so sort of learning how to be a family member after, being independent, there's a learning curve. Again, you're used to your life looking differently, and then, we're all inside. So I think the model of listening before acting in anything, if I have two brothers and I love them dearly, but they get on my nerves sometimes. And so instead of coming at them being like, oh, I thought I was gonna have the car today, and just like listening and being like, okay, we can work through this, like I'll drop you off. And it sounds so simple, but even like as a parent, your kid comes to you and you're freaking out. And then I remember like this summer of literally spending weeks trying to find a community and listen to them, and I think those needs are a little bit more present when your family is right around you. So you have a lot more opportunities to listen. I think that would be what I would take away as I move forward, hopefully becoming mother, grandmother, working member of the workforce. Just remembering to listen before I act, and remembering that everybody's experience shapes how, they're feeling and responding as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Maura. And thank you for the questions. And I know there was one more from Linda Tuttle, and I saw Scott replied in the chat. One of the things we're hoping to do out of this, as we're coming to the close of our time here, is in addition to the resource that we provided for all of you as a handout, that was sort of our working document that we were providing and creating week to week for the mentors, is that here at McGrath, we're hoping to really invest in developing and fleshing out more deeply this model of pastoral creativity and helping to showcase some of the resources and the projects that our various mentors have done. And a little plug for our Notre Dame Vision social media, because one of the ways we have tried to extend this further is that for the last few weeks and for a few more, we're inviting the wider community in by posting on the Notre Dame Vision Facebook, Instagram, and Twitters on Monday, one of the movements, a corporal and a spiritual work of mercy. And then on Friday, some reflections from our mentors and things they've developed. So as a way of, as they're still unfolding, we're still in our final week, being able to explore a little bit more concretely, because there's 48 incredible young adults who could have shared their own stories. And we chose these 3 to just highlight some different dimensions of this. But we're so grateful for everyone able to join us today and for your willingness. I saw many names in the chat of folks who have been with us here in Vision in the past. We look forward to thinking with you creatively about how we can continue to grow and exercise our co-responsibility out in the community. And just this dimension, not just for young people, but for all of us. And the question about in parish life, how could this model perhaps inform the way we do RCIA, family catechesis, just live as the domestic church by practicing our attentiveness to one another. So we thank you very much all for joining us today, and really encourage you to follow along with us. And next week will be our final seminar entitled Designing for Co-Responsibility with Dr. Claire Kilbane. So we thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, a deep thank you to Haley, Maura, and Ua for taking the extra time to work through presenting part of their experiences with us, and for Scott being an incredible companion on this journey. We thank you all so very much. We hope you have a good evening, and God bless.